Evan Morales woke before the sun, not because the alarm clock demanded it, but because worry had already shaken him awake. The little apartment around him was silent except for the hum of an old refrigerator that had seen better decades. On the kitchen counter, taped above a pile of overdue bills, was a single note he had scribbled to himself the night before: "Assessment at 8 o'clock. Do not be late." He read it again, as though the words might burn themselves deeper into his mind. His stomach tightened. This morning was more than just another commute across the city. It was the chance to step out of the cycle of temp jobs and late rent notices. If he passed the skills test at the training centre, there would be steady work waiting on the other side. Maybe not glamorous work, maybe not even easy, but real work. The kind with a paycheck that came every week instead of maybe next month. He shuffled into the kitchen, poured the last of the cheap coffee grounds into a dented pot, and waited for the thin liquid to drip through. The smell filled the room, bitter but familiar. He glanced at his phone lying on the counter. A new message glowed across the cracked screen. "You'll do fine this time, Evan. I'm proud of you." It was from his sister, the only person who never seemed to stop believing he could climb out of the hole he had been stuck in. He smiled, though it wavered quickly into a sigh. Pulling on his worn jacket, he checked the battered folder that held his paperwork. He had triple-checked it last night, but still opened it one more time, touching the edges of the forms like a ritual. He could not afford to mess this up, not again. Outside, the morning air was crisp and sharp against his skin. A thin sheet of frost clung to the railings and trash can lids, glittering faintly under the first light of dawn. He pulled the jacket tighter around him and breathed in the mixture of city scents. Roasted bagels from a corner shop just opening, exhaust from the first buses groaning down the street, the faint metallic tang of cold iron stairways. The neighbourhood was already waking, people moving with the practiced rhythm of those who lived by the clock. Evan's shoes tapped against the pavement as he walked toward the subway station. Each step carried the weight of a promise, made to his sister, to himself, to the version of him that still believed he could build a life steadier than the one he had now. He knew the city would not wait for him. Trains did not wait, bills did not wait, and landlords certainly did not wait. Still, as he reached the corner and saw the station entrance ahead, a flicker of something like hope stirred inside him. Today had the power to change the story. Today could be the beginning of something different. He gripped the strap of his old briefcase until his knuckles whitened, whispering under his breath like a prayer only he could hear. "Do not be late, do not mess this up." And with that, he descended the steps into the noise and shadows of the city's underground, unaware that one small choice on this morning would alter everything he thought he knew about second chances. The turnstile clicked behind Evan as he stepped into the roar of the subway station. The air was heavy with the smell of damp concrete and burnt coffee drifting from a cart by the stairs. A musician strummed a guitar near the tiled wall, his open case holding only a handful of coins that clinked each time someone dropped one in. Commuters streamed past, their shoes slapping against the floor, eyes locked on their phones or fixed straight ahead. Evan pressed closer to the platform edge, glancing up at the glowing board that announced the next train. "Minor delays due to congestion," the sign read. He cursed under his breath. The clock above it showed 7:15. If the train didn't come soon, he would already be running on borrowed time. The crowd around him shifted and sighed as the loudspeaker crackled with another garbled announcement. Someone muttered, "Same thing every morning," and a woman rolled her eyes, adjusting her scarf. Evan tried to breathe steadily, but his chest felt tight, as if the whole station had closed in on him. He thought about the last time he had been late to an interview, how the receptionist had given him a pitying smile before telling him the hiring manager had already moved on. He had walked home that day with rejection hanging over him like a cloud, wondering how many more chances life would give. He couldn't let that happen again, not today. He pulled out his phone, opened the calendar app, and stared at the words "Skills Assessment, 8:00 a.m. His finger hovered over the reminder button, as though setting one more alarm could bend time to his will. His reflection in the black screen looked back at him, tired eyes, jaw set, but still holding on to something fragile. Determination, maybe, or just stubbornness. Finally, the sound of steel grinding against steel echoed through the tunnel. Lights glimmered in the distance, and the train rumbled into view, brakes squealing as it slowed. Relief washed over the platform as people surged forward, jockeying for position near the doors. Evan squeezed into the car, his shoulder pressed against a man in a thick parka, his briefcase wedged against his chest. The train lurched forward, swaying as it gathered speed. Evan stared at the map above the doors, counting each stop like a countdown. Every minute mattered. He rehearsed in his head the instructions the program had sent. Check in at the desk, show identification, sign the sheet. No grace period, no excuses. As the train roared through the tunnel, he felt his throat tighten. He whispered to himself again, barely audible above the screech of the wheels, "Just get there, that's all you have to do." What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the city had already set another test waiting for him above ground, one that would not measure his skills with tools or paperwork, but something far deeper. The train screeched into the next station, shaking dust from the ceiling and jolting everyone inside. Evan tightened his grip on the pole, eyes flicking to the clock on his phone. If everything ran smoothly, he would have just enough time to make it across town. That word, if, felt heavier than the briefcase resting against his knees. When the doors slid open, a stream of passengers spilled onto the platform, weaving around one another like a river breaking into smaller currents. Evan followed, his shoulders brushing strangers, his heartbeat racing to the rhythm of rushing footsteps. The station smelled faintly of rust and damp stone. He was halfway toward the stairs when he heard it, the frustrated sigh of a young mother standing beside a double stroller. The elevator stood frozen behind her, its screen flashing a dull red sign, "Out of service." She looked from the stroller to the steep flight of stairs, biting her lip. The toddlers inside kicked their small feet, one clutching a juice box, the other tugging at the zipper of his coat. Commuters passed her without pause. A man in a suit gave a quick glance, then pulled his headphones higher and kept walking. A teenager stepped around her, eyes glued to a glowing phone screen. The city moved, as it always did, without waiting for anyone who fell behind. Evan slowed, his eyes catching the clock on the wall. 7:23. Every second mattered. If he missed the next connection, there would be no way to reach the centre by 8. His throat tightened. His chance was slipping, and all he had to do was keep moving, just keep walking, just like everyone else. But his feet stopped. The woman was kneeling now, trying to soothe one child who had begun to cry, her face flushed with embarrassment as people squeezed past. Evan felt something twist inside his chest. He had seen that look before, the look of someone overwhelmed, abandoned in a moment when help should be simple but never comes. He stood frozen for half a breath, then set his briefcase down on the step beside him. "Do you need a hand?" he asked, voice steady though his stomach churned. The woman looked up, startled, her eyes wide with relief and worry all at once. I just need to get them up to the street," she said quickly, her voice breaking a little. Evan nodded. "We'll do it together." As he reached for the stroller's frame, the train behind them pulled away with a metallic groan, disappearing down the tunnel. Evan barely noticed. His choice had already been made, and though a part of him screamed about the clock, another part knew there was no other option he could live with. What he didn't yet realise was that this small pause, this decision to stop when the city told him to keep moving, was about to change the entire course of his day, and maybe more than that. Evan slid his hands under the stroller's frame and nodded at the young mother. "I'll take the front. You hold steady in the back." She gave a nervous smile, clutching the handles tighter. Together they began the climb. The stroller was heavier than he expected. Each bump of the wheels against concrete jolted through his arms. He counted softly under his breath. 1, 2, 3, as if rhythm alone could carry them upward. The toddlers laughed at the bouncing ride, one of them clapping and shouting, "Rocket ship! Rocket ship!" The words made Evan chuckle despite the strain. Halfway up, his foot slipped on a damp patch of the stair. The stroller tilted forward and his stomach lurched. The mother gasped. Evan tightened his grip, his muscles screaming, refusing to let go. For one terrifying second, he thought they might all go tumbling back. Then, with a desperate heave, he steadied the weight again. The kids squealed with delight, oblivious to the danger. From the landing above, a teenager paused, phone raised. Evan caught the faint click of a camera. The kid wasn't helping, just filming, but Evan had no energy to care. All that mattered was reaching the top. "Almost there," he grunted, sweat beading at his temple. His jacket sleeve slid back, exposing old scars across his forearm, reminders of other days spent lifting more than he should have. Step by step, they pressed on until the stroller finally rolled onto flat ground. The mother bent over, breathless. "I don't even know what I would have done without you," she whispered. Her gratitude shone in her eyes, but Evan's attention drifted past her. Below, the train he needed let out a long metallic groan, doors closing with a hiss. He stood frozen, watching the lights fade into the tunnel. His chest tightened as the sound died away. That had been his chance, sliding out of reach right in front of him. He forced a smile for the mother, adjusting his grip on the briefcase. "Just glad they're safe," he said. His voice sounded steady, though inside he was unravelling. As she wheeled her children toward the exit, Evan turned back to the staircase, shoulders heavy. The stroller's weight was gone, but in its place was something harder to carry. The knowledge that his choice had cost him more than he could afford. Evan stood at the top of the stairs, his pulse still racing from the effort. The noise of the departing train echoed below, fading into the dark tunnel like a door slamming shut on his chance. He tightened his grip on the briefcase and swallowed hard, trying to push back the sting rising in his throat. The mother gave him one last grateful smile before wheeling her children toward the street. Her little boy waved a chubby hand at him, still giggling about their rocket ride. Evan lifted a hand in return, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. When she disappeared into the crowd, he was left standing alone under the flickering light of the platform. Cold air seeped through his jacket, settling heavy in his chest. He checked the clock again. 7:30. By the time another train came and rattled its way across the city, he would already be behind. The crowd around him moved with purpose, everyone chasing their own destinations. A man scrolled through emails on his phone. A woman balanced a paper cup of coffee as she dug for her Metro card. Nobody seemed to notice the stranger who had just lost something invisible but important. Evan pressed his palms against the edge of the briefcase, hard enough for his knuckles to ache. He told himself he should have kept walking, that nobody would have judged him if he had. People passed that mother by without a second glance, and the city kept moving. He could have done the same. He could have been on that train, but deep down he knew he couldn't. He had seen her struggling, the panic in her eyes, the way the toddlers fidgeted without understanding. Ignoring it would have been impossible. He had made the only choice he could live with. Still, the price of it settled on him like a stone. The next train groaned into the station, brakes screeching. Evan climbed aboard, sliding into a seat near the back. The car smelled faintly of wet coats and old newspapers. He leaned his forehead against the scratched glass of the window, watching the tunnel lights flash by. His reflection stared back at him, creased shirt, weary eyes, determination cracked at the edges. He whispered to himself, barely audible above the hum of the engine, "You did the right thing." But the words didn't carry the comfort he wanted. They hung in the air, thin and uncertain, as the train lurched forward and carried him farther from the future he had hoped to claim that morning. By the time Evan climbed the steps out of the station, the morning had grown sharper, the sun rising higher but offering no warmth. He jogged across the street, dodging a delivery truck, his breath coming out in hard bursts. His legs ached from the sprint, but he forced himself forward. The training centre's brick building finally came into view, its glass doors reflecting the grey sky. He checked his phone. 7:58. Maybe, just maybe, he could make it. He yanked the door open and hurried inside, the briefcase bouncing against his thigh. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and paper. A folding table had been set up near the entrance, a clipboard resting on top, and behind it sat a woman in a navy cardigan with a visitor badge clipped to her chest. "Name?" she asked without looking up. "Evan Morales," he said, breathless, handing her his identification with trembling fingers. She glanced at the clock on the wall, then back at him. Her expression shifted into something like pity, though her voice stayed flat. "Check-in closed at 8 sharp, I'm sorry." Evan blinked, chest still heaving. "It's only..." He turned, eyes locking on the clock. 8:02, just 2 minutes past. His throat tightened. "Please, I ran here. The train, there was a problem. I can take the test now. I'm ready." The woman shook her head gently, as though this was a conversation she had rehearsed too many times. "Rules are rules. If we let one person slide, we'd have to let everyone. The next session is in 3 weeks. You can sign up again." Her words landed heavier than any weight he had carried up those subway stairs. 3 weeks. 3 weeks meant another rent cycle without steady income. It meant calls from the landlord, more nights lying awake counting bills instead of sheep. He tried one last time, lowering his voice, his hand pressing against the edge of the table. "I need this. I can't wait that long. Isn't there anything you can do?" For a moment, she met his eyes and he thought he saw a flicker of sympathy. But then she looked back down at the clipboard and slid his identification toward him. "I'm sorry. You'll have to come back." The conversation was over. Evan took his ID with numb fingers. The briefcase strap dug into his shoulder as he turned and walked back toward the doors. Each step felt heavier than the last. Outside, the city roared on, horns blaring, people rushing, lives moving forward. He stood there on the sidewalk, the cold air biting his face, and felt as if he had been left behind. For the first time that morning, the hope he had been carrying cracked wide open, leaving only silence in its place. Evan walked without direction, his shoes scuffing against the sidewalk. The city seemed louder than usual. Car horns, sirens, vendors shouting about fresh bagels, all of it clashed in his ears. He tugged his jacket tighter and turned down a side street, away from the rush. His chest felt hollow, his mind spinning with numbers, rent due, bills stacked, weeks until the next session. He stopped at a bench near a bus stop and sank down, the briefcase resting against his knees like dead weight. For a long moment, he just stared at the cracks in the pavement. The thought of calling his sister and telling her he had failed again made his throat burn. He couldn't bear to hear her pause on the other end of the line, that pause where hope gave way to disappointment. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He almost ignored it, but when it wouldn't stop, he pulled it out and saw a string of notifications lighting up the cracked screen. Mentions, tags, messages. Confused, he tapped one. A photo filled the display, a grainy shot from inside the station. Him, bent forward, arms straining, carrying the front of that stroller up the steep staircase. The caption read, "This man stopped his day to help me when the elevator was broken. I don't even know his name, but he lifted more than my stroller today. He reminded me people still care. Thank you." Signed with a name, Maya. Evan blinked, scrolling through the comments. Some were short. Good man, faith in humanity. But others went further. One person offered to buy him coffee for a week. A small bakery promised a free muffin if he ever came by. He shook his head, bewildered. All this for carrying a stroller? Then his eyes landed on one comment buried among the rest. It came from an account with a small badge next to the name, Operations Manager, CityWorks Energy. The words made his breath catch. "Maya, please message me. We're always looking for people who step up when no one else will. Skills can be taught, character cannot. I'd like to meet the man who helped you today." Evan stared at the screen, reading the comment again and again, as if the letters might change if he blinked too fast. His pulse thumped in his ears. Could this be real? Or was it just another thread of hope that would unravel in his hands? The phone buzzed once more. A direct message this time from Maya herself. "I told him about you. He wants to talk. Please don't disappear. I think this could matter." For the first time all day, Evan felt something shift inside him. The weight in his chest didn't vanish, but it loosened, just enough for a thin ribbon of light to slip through. Maybe, just maybe, the city wasn't finished with him yet. Evan hesitated outside the warehouse, staring up at the faded sign that read, CityWorks Energy. The building looked ordinary, brick walls weathered by years of rain, a wide garage door where forklifts hummed in and out. Men in hard hats crossed the lot with tool belts clinking at their waists, laughing with the easy rhythm of people who belonged. He didn't feel like he belonged, not yet. His phone buzzed again with a message from Maya. "He's waiting inside. Don't worry. You're doing the right thing." Evan swallowed the lump in his throat, pushed through the heavy glass door, and found himself in a lobby that smelled faintly of lumber and fresh coffee. A man in a flannel shirt stood near the reception desk, a clipboard tucked under one arm. His beard was streaked with grey, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "You must be Evan," the man said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, the kind of handshake that spoke of long days spent working, not sitting behind a desk. "Name's Robert. I saw that post. Impressive. Not the photo, what you did." Evan shifted his briefcase awkwardly. "It was nothing, just someone needed help." Robert studied him for a moment, then gave a short nod. "That's the kind of answer I like. Look, we run a program here. It's not glamorous, and it's not easy, but it's steady work, good pay, and a future if you stick with it. Skills we can teach, character we can't." Evan's chest tightened. I missed the assessment this morning. They told me I'd have to wait 3 weeks." "That's true," Robert said. "We can't bend rules for tests. Safety matters. But here's what I can do. I can get you into the next session, 5 days from now. Between now and then, we'll give you prep materials, a bus pass to get here, even a pair of boots if you need them." Evan blinked, unsure if he had heard right. "You'd really do that, for me?" Robert's eyes softened. "For anyone who proves they're worth betting on. You carried that stroller because it was the right thing to do, not because someone was watching. That tells me more than any resume could." He handed Evan a small envelope. Inside was a bus card and a slip of paper with a time written neatly across it. "Be here on that day, 7 in the morning sharp. No excuses, no second chances. You show up, you give it everything, and you earn your place." Evan closed his fingers around the envelope, the edges digging into his palm like proof this wasn't a dream. His throat tightened with something close to relief, but also fear. He had been given an opening, but it was still up to him to walk through it. "I'll be here," he said quietly, but with a certainty that surprised even himself. Robert clapped him on the shoulder. "Good, that's all I needed to hear." As Evan stepped back into the daylight, the cold air hit his face, but it felt different now. Sharper, cleaner, alive with possibility. For the first time in months, he had a date to circle on his calendar. A chance not to be wasted. 5 days later, Evan stood in a wide training room that smelled of sawdust and machine oil. The walls were lined with tool racks, safety posters curling at the edges, and a long row of folding chairs where other applicants sat, fidgeting with pencils. Each of them looked younger, sharper, more confident than he felt. Evan gripped his briefcase tight against his knees, though there was nothing in it he needed now. No papers, no resume, just the weight of his nerves. A whistle blew, sharp and final. "Testing begins now," an instructor called. His voice echoed off the high ceiling. The first section was written. Sheets of paper landed on the desks with a slap. Evan stared at the questions, his pulse hammering. Identify the correct protective gear for electrical work. Explain how to secure a ladder on uneven ground. Words swam on the page, crowding together. He chewed the end of his pencil, his mind stalling. Around him, pencils scratched furiously. He closed his eyes for a second, heard the echo of a child's voice from that morning at the station. "Rocket ship." The memory steadied him. He bent over the paper and began to write, pulling answers from old lessons with his father, from afternoons helping patch leaks in their apartment, from common sense born of survival. When the whistle blew again, his sheet was half filled, smudged with eraser marks. He didn't know if it would be enough. Then came the practical test. The group was led into a warehouse space where a mock setup waited. A scaffold to climb, boards to cut, wires to connect safely under the instructor's watch. Evan's palms sweated as he buckled the safety harness around his chest. The metal hooks felt heavy, clinking against his side. "Up you go," the instructor barked. Evan climbed, boots gripping the steel rungs. His arms trembled halfway, the height pressing down on him. He almost stopped. Below, he saw other applicants watching, some with folded arms, some with faint smirks. Shame burned in his stomach. He forced his legs to move, one step, then another. He reached the top, secured the line as instructed, and descended with shaky knees but intact pride. The final task was wiring a small circuit. His hands shook as he twisted the cables, trying to remember the order. For a moment, he was sure he'd get it wrong, that he'd watch the bulb stay dark and walk out a failure. He whispered under his breath, "Come on, just work." He flipped the switch. The bulb flickered, once, twice, and then glowed steady. His chest broke open with relief. Hours later, the applicants gathered while the instructors tallied scores. Evan sat on the edge of his chair, sweat dried in patches on his shirt. When his name was called, he almost didn't stand, afraid it was to send him away. But the words that followed made his knees weak. You passed, barely, but you passed. The room blurred for a moment. He let out a breath he hadn't realised he was holding. For once, almost was enough. On his first morning of real work, Evan laced up the heavy boots they had given him. The leather still felt stiff, the kind that needed breaking in, but when he stood, they grounded him in a way old sneakers never had. Out in the yard, trucks rumbled, tools clinked, and men joked as they adjusted hard hats. It was noisy, messy, alive. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged somewhere. Robert spotted him across the lot and called out, "Glad you showed up." Just 4 words, but they landed deep. Evan nodded, swallowing the tightness in his throat. At lunch, a familiar voice broke through the chatter. He turned to see Maya walking toward him with her 2 kids, bundled in hats and scarves, a paper tray balanced in her hands. The little boy spotted him and ran ahead, shouting, "Rocket Captain!" before wrapping his arms around Evan's leg. The tray held coffees, sandwiches, and a muffin the size of a fist. Maya smiled as she set it down. "We wanted to see you. You didn't just carry that stroller, you carried us through a hard morning, and now look at you." Evan crouched, meeting the boy's wide eyes. "I think you carried me too," he said softly. The boy laughed and shoved the muffin into his hands like a gift too precious to refuse. Around them, a few workers grinned, nodding at Evan with quiet respect. That evening, back in his apartment, Evan pinned his first paycheck stub to the cabinet with a magnet. The paper was thin, but to him it felt heavier than gold. He pulled out his phone, stared at his sister's name for a moment, then pressed call. When her voice answered, he could hear the worry already woven into her hello. He took a shaky breath. "I passed the test," he said. "I started today. It's not much yet, but it's real." For a heartbeat, the line was quiet. Then she laughed, a bright, tearful sound that filled the empty kitchen. "I knew you could. I'm proud of you, Evan." He closed his eyes, letting the words sink into him like sunlight. After they hung up, he sat for a while with the stub still pinned above him, the hum of the old fridge steady in the background. The wallpaper was still peeling. The light still flickered, but inside, something had shifted. He sipped his coffee and whispered into the room, "Sometimes you miss your train, and sometimes that's exactly how you find your way." For the first time in months, his smile came easily, without effort. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tomorrow was his, and that was enough. Stories like Evan's remind us that the choices we make, even in small moments, can change the course of our lives. Doing the right thing often costs us something in the short run. Time, comfort, maybe even an opportunity. But over time, character has a way of carrying us further than convenience ever could. The lesson is simple. You never really know who is watching, and you never know what doors will open when you choose compassion over indifference. So here's the question for you. When was the last time you paused your own plans to help someone else, and how did it shape you? Thank you for listening to this story. We'll meet again soon, right here on Rain Inside.